Bemis Center artist in residence Janette Beckman has always been fascinated by alternative music scenes and street culture. Beginning in the 1970s, she documented British punk culture for The Face and Melody Maker, photographing The Clash, The Ramones, The Specials, and other big names in the scene. In 1982, Beckman moved to New York and focused her lens on the early days of hip-hop, capturing candid images of hip-hop greats like Afrika Bambaataa, Run DMC, Salt-N-Pepa, and Grandmaster Flash. And she has a photography exhibit on at the Carver Bank building, 2416 Lake Street, now through November 29th. There's an opening reception tomorrow at 6 p.m. and Janette Beckman joins me in the studio this morning. Good morning. Thanks so much for coming in.
Good morning.
Your body of work is substantial just in its volume, but also in the fact that it covers several decades, even though you're still young, I would say.
Thank you.
But, you know, you started this career really just right out of college and were thrown into a scene that was just emerging. Set the scene for what it was like for you as a young person with a camera. How did you find your way into photographing the punk scene, and how did that develop?
Well, I'd been out of college for a little bit, and I was working at a youth club, and I had a portfolio, and I walked one day into a music paper with my little portfolio, and I met this woman, Vivian Goldman, and she was the editor there, and she's like, "Oh, I like your pictures. What are you doing tonight? Do you want to go and photograph Susie and the Banshees?"
Wow.
At the Roundhouse. And I was like, okay. And I didn't really know what I was doing. I'd never photographed a rock band in my life before. So I trotted over there with my camera that night, took pictures, turned up the next day with the pictures, and she's like, "Oh, these are good." She gave me another job right on the spot, and that was the start of it. And
it was a little bit different in those days because nobody was really focused on the punk scene. It was more towards rock and roll and a few other things, wasn't it?
Yeah, and I started to work for this paper, Melody Maker, and they were very much focused on rock, and the editor, sort of cowboy boots, jeans tucked into cowboy boots down the pub, and I was like an ex-art student, wearing my kind of T-shirt with my pajama bottoms, or, Levi's and Doc Martens. I was more kind of artsy. So, the punk stuff, people weren't interested in it that much. They were like, "Oh, give it to her. She's just a second stringer photographer." So I got to photograph all the bands that I really wanted to shoot.
What a break for you.
I was lucky.
You were not necessarily a person that was very outgoing, if I understand you properly, from some of your interviews and other media. You were relatively shy. Was that something that helped you or hindered?
I was kind of shy and quiet, and it was good for me in a way because I sort of could be like a fly on the wall. And, when I wasn't photographing the band, I could go and photograph the fans, which I was always really interested in, the style and the fashions of the day. So it actually was great for me. It was good because people tended to not even notice I was there, so I could go and focus my lens on things when people weren't really watching, which was great. Through
your career, you've really been interested in capturing rebel cultures. And what was the sort of rebellion that was taking place in the punk movement? Well,
in the late 70s, England was in a terrible economic situation. I mean, there was no work. It was kind of grim, rainy place, kind of dark, gloomy days. And, people were really fed up. Kids didn't have any hope of getting jobs. So they were rebelling, finally. They just stood up. And they were rebelling against the class system and the Queen and the country. And it was really the first time, I think, that a youth rebellion had swept through the country. Punks were dressed as extremely as possible, mohawks and piercings.
There was that sort of self-mutilation aspect to it, or one would describe it as that. Back at the time, the hairstyles, as you say, with the mohawks, the chains, the gear, the tattoos, the other body piercings, and then the music. It was just a complete all-in rebellion. But honestly, now when you look at modern fashion and culture, so many of those things have been absorbed, and it's as if that culture somehow became mainstream. Would you agree?
Totally. And I live in New York near the East Village, and every other person is tattooed. Pretty much the whole of the East Village is tattooed now. It's nothing unusual. So yeah, but there are other types of rebellions going on. And
let's talk about that, and specifically about your exhibition, the Legend Legends of Hip Hop. You moved to New York in 1982, and again, we're very fortunate to capture another rebel culture in its infancy. Talk about where hip hop began and your entrance into that.
Well, I was working for Melody Maker in London, and the first ever hip-hop show to come to Europe passed through London. And, of course, I got the job to go and photograph it because nobody was interested in it whatsoever. And it just blew my mind because, you know, there were artists, dancers, poets, musicians, scratchers, rappers, double Dutch girls.
And scratching, even at that time, was very rudimentary, wasn't it?
Oh, yeah. It was amazing. And, you know, they had Grand Mixer, DST, and Africa Bambaataa were there, Futura, Dondi. Like legends of hip-hop were there at this one show. And I was hanging out with them all day, taking pictures in the hotel and this, that, and the other. They'd never been to England before. When the show went on, it was amazing because there were so many disciplines and the styles were different. I just fell in love with it right there.
Many of your pictures capture some of these artists when they're very, very young. There's a picture of LL Cool J when he's probably 18 or 19 with a boombox. And that youthfulness in so many of your subjects really kind of speaks to a person emerging that somehow or another you seem to have captured. Did that strike you at the time that was that sort of candidness?
Well, my pictures are always candid, and I don't actually pose people. My idea is...
You don't like the stylists coming in?
No, I don't. Sorry, stylists, some of my best friends, but it's much better to just, you know, be one-to-one with the person. I feel like all my photographs are collaborations between me and the subject, and, you know, I try and get to know them and document who they are and where they are. And, you know, I love shooting stuff on location, and if I get to shoot an artist, I always ask them where would they like to be shot? You know, their home. I shot a lot of people back.
That's an interesting question. Where would you like to be shot?
Not that type of shot.
The
Photographed.
The photographs in this exhibition, I just want to let some of our listeners know that they include some of the most iconic images ever created of the early days of hip-hop, including early images of Run DMC, Big Daddy Kane, Salt and Pepper, and, of course, that young LL Cool J. And I also want we've got a couple of minutes to talk about another rebel culture, because you're still seeking those rebel cultures, and yet there's no massive movement, but there are small movements you're being able to find. Talk about the Go Hard Boys Harlem Bike Club.
I shot the Go Hard Boys. They were introduced to me by a biker friend that I have, and she said to me, you've got to go and meet these guys. So I went up to Harlem. I met them, and they liked me. They were like, come along next Sunday and, you know, hang out with us. And I ended up riding in the back of an F-150 truck down the Bruckner Expressway with people doing wheelies by my side. I was completely thrilled. And I spent the day with them, and I've spent many days with them since. They ride dirt bikes in New York City, which is illegal, and they do all these amazing tricks. And, you know, they're pretty much like a big family, and it's a way of keeping kids off the street and, you know, stopping them joining gangs and, you know, doing drugs or whatever. They're really into their bikes, and they put all their energy into their bikes. And, you know, it's a great culture, I think.
Yes.
And the gang, the Go Hard Boys have kind of adopted me as their official photographer now.
It's
cool.
Very, very worthwhile checking out your website, JanetteBeckman.com.
Correct.
Where one can also see the entire body of work, or at least much of it, including photographs from the summer of 1982, where you photographed gangs in Los Angeles.
That's right, yeah. I actually got connected with a East LA gang in 1982, actually, or 83, we're not sure. And I went down there. I was there for a month, and I kept going down there every day in my old rent-a-car, and it was amazing. I mean...
My guest today has been Janette Beckman. The exhibition Rebel Culture, Legends of Hip Hop and the Go Hard Boys, Harlem Bikers at Carver Bank, 24th and Lake Street, on through November 29th, with an opening reception tomorrow from 6 to 8 p.m. and an artist talk at 8.